Hi, I'm Bev Heim-Myers, CEO of the Huntington Society of Canada, and I'd like to welcome you to the 2015 HSC Symposium. Today we are joined by folks from Victoria to St. John's. 16 locations across Canada are joining us for this exciting symposium. We've evolved things, you'll notice. We've tried to mitigate any technical glitches. We've pre-recorded many things, but we'll still give you the opportunity for live questions. Let's hope everything goes smoothly today. You've already learned about clinical trials from the participant perspective. And now we're going to learn about clinical trials, HD clinical trials, and the bigger picture. To do that, we've invited Joe Giuliano, the Director of Clinical Operations at CHDI, to join us to answer some of your questions and our questions when it comes to clinical trials. Welcome, Joe. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Great to be here with you.
Can we dive right in?
Let's do it.
Okay. Let's start with the Enroll trial. Can you tell us, why is the Enroll study, Enroll HD, so important? What does it add to other studies? Why is it important?
Well, Enroll HD is more than just a study. It's a platform. And it's a platform to enable clinical research and clinical trials in HD. CHDI Foundation has invested a lot in Enroll HD. And one of the things that it does to help clinical trials is it provides a pool of people globally who have signed up and said that they're ready to participate in clinical trials. In addition to that, the data that is collected at the annual visits for those participants is extremely useful, not only for research, but also to inform clinical trials so that we can design the best clinical trials to get answers that we need about whether drugs work, are safe or not. And it allows us to also identify specific patients, the right patients for the right trials, because not every participant is eligible for every clinical trial.
This is a global study or a global platform. How many participants have enrolled in Enroll HD, and how many countries are represented?
Right now we have 16 countries represented, and we're going up to 19. And we have 7,400, just a little more than 7,400 participants. So it's growing rapidly. It's growing in Europe a little bit faster than North America. So I'm here to get our U.S. and Canadian participants interested. Not only is it growing in numbers, but it's also growing in the breadth of the data that's collected, because it's a longitudinal study, so people come back for annual follow-ups, and that information is growing as well. So it's providing a very rich database for researchers to work with.
Why do you think it hasn't grown as quickly in North America as it has in Europe?
That's a good question. I think in North America, let me think about that for a second. I think one of the main reasons it hasn't grown as much is because the registry study in Europe is transitioning into the Enroll HD study. So there is sort of a direct connection between the legacy study and Enroll HD, the new study. Cohort, which was done in North America and Australia, ended several years ago, so there wasn't a transition period between Cohort and Enroll HD. But I'm happy to say a lot of the Cohort participants are continuing into Enroll HD. Also, the geography in Canada and the US is very, very different than Europe, as you well know. And people are spread out. And if you look at the sites that we have especially in the United States, they are clustered on the coasts. So we have to find ways to identify centers in areas that are underserved in U.S. as well as in Canada.
So just so our HSC and HD community in Canada know, you participated before the last conference in the Clinical Trial Readiness Program. So that's one of our ways of connecting clinicians across Canada and helping new clinicians open sites where they can participate in research, clinical research. So we have another meeting coming up October 5th, and we have 22 clinicians from across Canada coming to that meeting. And we've created a checklist, clinical trial readiness checklist, a clinical trial best practices, and we've created a mentorship program where the seasoned clinicians can help with new clinicians coming in from a mentorship perspective. So that's come a long way, even since the last time you were at that meeting. So I hope that will help encourage new clinics in Canada and new sites so that people don't have to travel as far.
I think that's a great initiative, and the HD families and patients in Canada are really blessed with some very, very experienced and fine physicians who provide great care and participate in research. So to grow that number and to have a mentorship program and also to have a platform like Enroll HD that they can connect to is going to be great. It's going to be very helpful.
And certainly add value to the overall understanding of HD. And so when clinical trials start, if somebody is in the Enroll platform, if their data is in there, and a clinical trial starts, that would be good for their bio, whatever, then it's easier for us to get in touch with them, to let them know.
Yes, let me explain exactly how it works. So a pharmaceutical company will start a study around the globe, in Canada, in the U.S., and they would design a clinical trial which will have an inclusion-exclusion criteria. And we would take that inclusion and exclusion criteria and information from that and look at our Enroll HD database and match participants with those criteria to the study. Then we would take that list of participants and send it to their doctor. So the doctor that they see for Enroll HD. Then the doctor, we don't know who the participants are because their data is coded. There's no names or anything.
So privacy is utmost in this.
Absolutely.
Their information is protected.
That's correct. So that coded information goes to the doctor, their Enroll HD doctor, and either the doctor or someone from their staff will then contact them. Now, the important thing is that in the Enroll HD study, people consent to being contacted. So it's one of our optional consents. We just don't contact anybody. We only contact the participants who said they'd like to be contacted about future research studies. So that allows the site, as you can imagine, to have a ready list of people that they can start with and contact to see if they are actually eligible for that study. Just because you appear on that list doesn't mean that you're going to ultimately get into the study. That means that you'll be contacted, you'll come to the doctor, and they'll do a proper screening visit, assessment, to see if you're actually eligible.
So it's important for people to know that there's still a process involved.
Yes.
And you still have to meet the criteria for the study. But it's one big step to get there.
Oh, it's much, much easier. It saves an enormous amount of time. And it's when I talk to my colleagues who do clinical operations in other illnesses and in other areas, this is the way of the future. It's important to realize that a lot of these studies are looking for very specific types of patients with very specific criteria. So here comes my participate in Enroll speech. it's important that as many people get involved in Enroll as possible. The bigger the pool of participants, the easier it's going to be to identify the right people for the right studies. So I can't encourage enough people to become involved.
And one of the barriers in Canada to any clinical study for HD is genetic discrimination. So we have made great strides. There's a government bill presented before the election. It died on the table when the election was called, but it's a nonpartisan issue. All parties have agreed. So I think things will move very quickly after the election. We're still advocating and trying to make that happen. But hopefully after the election, in short order, genetic information from genetic tests will be protected. We have many government parties. So it's protected in the States, it's protected in the European Union, Australia, the UK, Canada lags there. So we're working hard. We're working hard to make that happen. So it's good for our community to know that we don't protect it yet, but we're moving in the right direction to protect it. Before we move on to other clinical trials in Canada, is there anything else you want people to know about Enroll HD?
Well, I think a couple things. First of all, to talk about genetic testing, you don't have to know your status to be an Enroll HD. So we welcome at-risk family members who don't know their genetic status. Everyone who enters Enroll HD, however, does give a sample of blood, and their CAG determination is made, even the at-risk population. But we keep all of that information completely separate from the actual Enroll HD database. And we have a special data safety monitoring committee that reviews that information on a regular basis to make sure that we're doing high quality CAG determinations, to make sure that for participants who have been tested and are now being tested again as part of Enroll HD, that if there's a discrepancy in those genetic determinations, that those are reported to the doctor for action if the doctor thinks that's appropriate. And also, if in the very, very rare case that an unaffected family member or a control participant may have an expansion. So that's all kept private, and it's blinded from the physician, everyone who participates or runs the study, and also the participants.
Is it protocol blinded from the participants, or is it their choice?
It's protocol, so it's very strict.
Yeah.
And even so it's not available now. Obviously, this raises issues in underserved areas like in Latin America, where genetic testing is not available, and we're working through some of those issues. But it's a very strict protocol that can't be changed to protect people's privacy. The second thing I wanted to just mention about participation is, this is a global effort. Huntington's disease is a global disease, and Enroll HD as a global platform sort of models the effort that it's going to take, and we're going to win this battle. But it's going to take a huge global effort. So it's really encouraging when I go around and meet different groups to hear people feel so. People who may have felt alone in their life and in their struggle, now they feel connected to a bigger effort, and that's I think very rewarding for those of us that work on Enroll HD.
I would say that I so agree with you. I would say that one of the the truly wonderful things about the HD community is that we do not have borders. And we know it's a global effort, and everybody's pulling together for answers and to expedite discovery to solutions and to the HD population. Nobody owns the information. Everybody wants to share it.
Yeah.
We will beat this.
Yes.
Yeah, no question. So other clinical trials in Canada. What else is happening in Canada from a clinical trial perspective?
There's a lot happening, and there's a lot happening all over the world. So in Canada, there are several clinical trials that are currently going on. Let's talk about one that just ended, the PRIDE study, which is a study that's sponsored by Teva Pharmaceuticals. Big push at the end to recruit all the patients into that study. And it's an important study because it's hopefully going to confirm some previous data that suggested that the drug predopidine may be helpful in controlling the involuntary movements of Huntington's disease. The next study is also a Teva study. It's called Legato. And that study involves a drug called liquinomod, which has a novel, what we call mechanism of action, and it addresses issue of inflammation in the brain. Multiple sclerosis is a fairly common neurodegenerative disease that is the result of inflammatory processes in the brain that are out of control. And there are some evidence that inflammation in the central nervous system plays a role in the pathology of Huntington's disease as well. So that drug is being tested in a phase 2 study to test if the dose is right and if it's safe in the HD population.
And phase 2 means?
Phase 2, so there's 3 phases of development in clinical development for drugs. First, phase 1, which is pure safety study to see if the drug is safe in human beings. Phase 2, where we look at a larger population and we test to see if the dose is correct, the dose of the medicine, and also to see if it has an action within the brain. Does it do something in the brain that we think it's supposed to do? And it also confirms safety in, a larger population at different doses. And then phase 3 is what we call the pivotal clinical trials. And that is where we finally test safety and efficacy for a dose of the drug that is supposed to work in the population. So those are the 3. And then there's phase 4, which is after a drug gets approved and marketed. There's also phase 4 studies that may confirm safety in larger populations. And that's important as well. So liquinomod is in phase 2. Another study is the Amaryllis study, which is sponsored by Pfizer. And Amaryllis is looking at a drug that inhibits an important enzyme that is in the brain, and it's particularly present in the part of the brain called the striatum, which is affected by Huntington's disease. And Pfizer has done a lot of work with this drug in animal models of Huntington's disease, and CHDI Foundation, my colleagues have worked on this drug as well and have developed a proof of concept to see if to show that this drug may work in human beings. So that study is going on right now. Unfortunately, the recruitment in the Legato study and the Pfizer study right now are lagging. So we are really in need of participants for those studies. And I'd like to take this opportunity to encourage people to go to your website, and find out where those studies are located, which sites are doing them, and if you think you would be interested or eligible to contact those physicians and see if you can participate.
So if I could, while you're talking about that, for our community, you can go onto our website. We have a map that identifies the locations of all the different studies. You can get into it. You can hit the link into the study, and that'll give you all the information about that study and the individuals to contact if you want to participate.
Yeah, it's a very helpful site.
So we've made it very easy, so people can do that. It's at their fingertips.
And then finally, a study that's gotten a lot of headlines lately is, and one that we're particularly proud of in the foundation because we've worked, my colleagues at the CHDI Foundation have worked very hard to get this to the clinic. So we're delighted that it's there. And this is the ISIS trial, which involves an antisense oligonucleotide, which is a molecule that blocks the production. So it works at the level of the genetics of Huntington's disease, and it decreases the amount of mutant Huntington, or the Huntington that is that affects that's responsible for Huntington's disease, and it decreases the levels of mutant Huntington. Now, this is a very early study. It's phase 1, so it's purely a safety study to make sure that this can be delivered safely and effectively to patients. It's groundbreaking. It's the first genetic therapy for Huntington's disease. It's the first of many therapies like it that are in the pipeline. And it's exciting also because it's testing new deliveries of these drugs. So because these molecules are so big, they can't get into the brain because of the blood-brain barrier. That's a natural barrier to prevent viruses and other things from getting into the brain. And it's being delivered through the spine, intrathecally, we call it. And it's delivered into the spine and will go into the brain. So it's, I just want to make sure that we expectations are appropriate for this. It's a very early study. It is phase 1. So it's still a long way to go. And the encouraging thing is that it's happening. It's being done. We're going to learn a lot. And we should all be appreciative of the volunteers who are coming forward to participate in that study.
It wouldn't happen without them.
It wouldn't happen without them.
And Joe, what is the difference between that study and the other studies you talked about?
So the ISIS study is, again, it involves a completely different delivery device,
right.
Delivery system. The other studies are of pills. So they're taken orally, and those drugs can get into the brain effectively. It's an earlier study. The ISIS study is phase 1. The other studies are both of the studies, the Pfizer study and the Teva study. Both Teva studies are phase 2. In addition to that, it's a novel mechanism, genetic therapy for Huntington's disease, stopping the actual mechanism of creating that protein in the brain. So
is it fair to say that it's the first time we've had a study that gets to the root cause of Huntington disease rather than the symptoms?
That's a fair statement, I would say. We don't know yet what's going to happen. Obviously, that's why we're doing the studies. But it is fair to say that this is the first treatment that actually targets mutant Huntington. All of the other treatments up to this point have been, like you said, symptomatic and have targeted other mechanisms that are further away from the actual production of mutant Huntington. But, that being said, we can't wait on the sideline and not participate in the other studies, because even though those other studies are not targeting mutant Huntington, those other studies are targeting potentially very important mechanisms in the pathology of this disease. And there may not be just one treatment for Huntington's disease. It may require a combination of treatments. We just don't know. So I would really encourage people, if they're sitting back and, I want to wait for the perfect ISIS study before to really try to think about that. I mean, obviously that's people's choice, but to really think about it, talk to their doctor about it, and try to get as much information as possible, like from your website, about the other studies, as well as the ISIS study, to try to understand how all of this fits together.
Will one treatment be the solution for everybody? Or because we're all individual, will it be a different mix of treatment? Or do we even know that yet?
I have no idea. Yet. But, it's a good question, because medicine is becoming more and more personalized.
Yes.
And it's not just sort of a trendy topic, personalized medicine. It's actually true. I mean, when you look at cancer, for example, cancer used to be treated based on where the cancer arose. So if you had lung cancer, you got this treatment. If you had brain cancer, you got this treatment. But now, what we're finding with cancer is that cancer is a large number of different causes and mutations, genetic mutations. And now, it's not lung cancer that you treat, but it's a mutation that you treat, or a specific cause that you treat. And that's highly personalized, because I'm using lung cancer as an example, but not every lung cancer is the same. So it's not, even in the genetics of Huntington's disease. Look at the important findings that were just published recently about genetic modifiers of Huntington's disease. It's not everybody that has these genetic modifiers. If these genetic modifiers turn out to be real modifiers of the disease, people who have those modifiers may require a different kind of treatment that is focused in that particular area. I mean, this is all speculation, but it's not. It's an important question, I think, and it is something that we have to keep, that gives it context.
So when you talk about the new studies very recent in the last couple of months that have come out of genetic modifiers, are you referring to the DNA recovery and different people having different ability? Is that what you're referring to?
Well, this is the study that Dr. Gazella.
Yes.
And So that's it's another reason why Enroll HD is so important, because a study like Enroll HD can only provide the numbers that you need. I mean, the first gene-wide association study that was done, that was recently published, required 4,000 participants. Now we need another 4,000 participants to confirm those findings. Basically, they found genes in the genome that are associated with changes in the age of onset
Yes.
of Huntington's disease. So a modifier that may actually delay the onset of the motor symptoms. So it's very promising. It's groundbreaking. Again, there's a theme here. A lot of groundbreaking things are happening, and it can inform us about future treatment possibilities.
And we would have never found that out without the HD community and their families participating in that study.
Absolutely.
We needed people who did not have the mutation, people who do have the mutation, people at different repeats of the mutation. So it's the families that are helping to push science forward, which is critical.
Absolutely. Only the families can push it forward. We have a lot of great scientists and physicians and nurses and researchers who have a lot of incredible ideas and are working incredibly hard. But without family members and without participants who give of their time and their effort, it's going to go nowhere. So you're absolutely right. I mean, where we are now in terms of groundbreaking research is because of everybody who's gone before us.
The information from clinical trials. How do scientists collaborate globally to make sure information is shared? How do we ensure that the communities get the information for the impact of studies, the results of studies? How is that happening?
Well, we have to do a better job of that. There are reporting systems now, like clinicaltrial.gov. Pharmaceutical companies have to not only register their study at the beginning, but they also have to register the results when the study is done. But I think groups like the Huntington Study Group, the European Huntington's Disease Network, CHDI, have really worked very hard in making sure that at the end of every study, once the results are available, that there is a sharing of the results with the community. And I know that that's been done for some of the studies, all of the studies in the past. And I know those groups are very committed to that, and that's very important.
I'll also put a plug in for HD Buzz here.
Yes.
That certainly for our community, it is a wonderful resource to better understand the clinical trials and what's happening with HD research in lay language. I use the site, and our families.
So do I.
Scientists use it. Everybody uses the site.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I strongly encourage our community to go to, and we help fund it. Mm-hmm. So it is something that we're all very proud of, and
it's truly a grassroots effort.
It is truly a grassroots effort, and certainly Dr. Jeff Carroll and Dr. Ed Wild have done an outstanding job with that.
They have.
So I really encourage the community to go there. Joe, is there anything we haven't talked about that we should to inform people about the bigger picture of clinical trials, what they should be thinking about, where they should go? Have we left anything out?
I don't think so, but I think this is a good opportunity to sort of step back for a minute and look at what's happening in the context of the history and really appreciate how far the community has come and how much is happening now. It's amazing. It's just it's humbling, and knowing that there's also a lot of other things, a lot of other projects that are developing as we speak around new therapies and additional therapies that address the genetic origin of the disease that are going to directly to the gene. So it's a good time, and it's an encouraging time. But we also have to remember that it doesn't go as fast as we'd like. And there is something that we do have control over, and that is recruiting into these clinical trials. That we can control. So every time that, and like I said, the Legato study and the Pfizer studies right now are delayed in their recruitment. So that's something we can do. So that's something we can change. I mean, we could have an impact on that.
Our
community. Yeah, the community. And we can't change the speed at which, discovery is going to go. Science, it's a very deliberative process, and it takes time. But we can make a difference in controlling the time that clinical trials get done. Once those potential treatments come to the clinic and come to the community, that's when we have to take control. And we really have to make sure that we have people who are ready to get into these clinical trials and to make them happen.
And the clinicians are ready.
And the clinicians the clinicians are ready. The clinics are ready. We really, I can't stress it enough, but there should be a sense of urgency when it comes to that.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming today and sharing great information. Thanks.
Appreciate it.